Okay, today we're going to be talking about the Kabbalah, but it may not be what you think this talk is going to be. I am a historian by nature, also a scholar of religion and archaeology, but we're gonna go through a different kind of tactic. What we're going to do is we're going to examine the history of the Kabbalah, where the Kabbalah came from. So we're looking into the origins. So it's that kind of rubric, if you're wondering. It still will be exciting and fun, but I just want to give you a heads up ahead of time that this is the kind of topic. So it's not necessarily a workshop, although I mean some of the ideas can be applied to a workshop. But we have to clear up a few things, and that is there happens to be two histories of the Kabbalah. You're going to have the traditional religious history that the Kabbalah originates from secret teachings that God gave Moses upon Mount Sinai, right? And they were mystically infused into the very letters and sounds of the Hebrew Bible, coded in, so to speak, right? And that from that point within the Torah, the Kabbalah existed, right? That's one version. And then you have the academic view concerning the origins of the Kabbalah, where this mystical tradition developed over a period of time, how it evolved gradually, and how it adopted many non-Jewish metaphysical and philosophical systems along the way. So obviously, even though I will report on the first history, because it's still historical to learn about their origin story, so to speak. I still want to make sure that you understand that we're going into the actual history of where the Kabbalah came from an academic perspective. Woohoo! Okay, so um, now obviously those who embrace the Kabbalah from a religious standpoint have mixed feelings concerning the academic positions. Some people consider it as two sides of the same coin. Since for many, they will believe that since God is omniscient and omnipotent, right, that he is able to permeate all religious traditions, and since truth is truth, right, and ideas that are valid in beliefs outside of Judaism can contribute to the bigger picture, so to speak, and of course, obviously, contributes to the evolution of the Kabbalah. Now, while the Kabbalah is said to have started with Moses, he did not fully supposedly understand completely what was revealed to him. In fact, I'm going to go over some Jewish traditions that say that the Kabbalah even goes all the way back to the time of Adam. Okay, so of course, a more conservative Jews will reject the academic view altogether. And so, you know, so it may not be popular with some, right? So I kind of like doing that. I feel like I'm doing the tap dance, the academic tap dance, because I want to make sure that I am respectful of these traditions. They're very important to so many people. But at the same time, I want to retain my integrity as an academic in this field. And I also want to take care of or clear up some misunderstandings. In popular culture, they will say that the Kabbalah it arrived originally from Spain, and we're looking at, they'll say, the 10 or 1100s, and that's where it came from. Then, of course, you're going to have others that say, well, those documents from Spain, the Kabbalah in Spain from that period of time. They themselves claim they have earlier origins going all the way back to the Roman period. And I was actually approached by somebody that says, "Oh yeah, you claim that the Kabbalah existed, aspects of it existed way before Spain and during the 10, 1100s and everything else like that." And yeah, well, of course, obviously, um, those writings claim that, but we know that those are reputed. Well, I just want to give you a head start on this one. I'm not going there either. What? I'm not. I'm going on. I have actually. I'm studying another strain of the origins of the Kabbalah that is not claimed by various books of the Kabbalah during the 10, 11, and 1200s. Does that make sense? As I said, we're doing something different because I know you're like, oh, well, they claim to be from the Roman period. Yes, I know, but I'm not doing that. I'm doing something else. So it's going to be a little bit more mysterious. But that means we have to be prepared. We're going to go through some stuff that most people have not gone through. Some of these materials you're not going to find in your Kabbalah books, history books on the Kabbalah. You're not going to find it there. And so you're going to hear about authors that you don't ordinarily hear about, but traditions that are not usually encountered. So this is another way, another path. Okay. Okay, so there you have it. Now, of course, obviously, I have to say that throughout the centuries, the Kabbalah was obviously very controversial, even within Jewish circles. It was shrouded. I'm using that word intentionally. If you follow the Kabbalah, you'd get the joke. But anyway, some Jews actually consider the Kabbalah as heretical, even for those who did accept the Kabbalah. They believe that the teachings were reserved for the very few. For example, it was traditional, unfortunately, for a very long time. No longer, but traditionally, when we certain circles, women were not allowed to have access to Kabbalah, right? Uh, and of course, that's held today amongst the Orthodox Jews as well. You also had to be, much older, at least 40 years of age. And then when you teach the Kabbalah, the idea is you're supposed to just give it to one disciple, in succession. So of all your followers, if you want to teach somebody, you just teach one of them. And so you're going to have, according to the Mishnah, you're going to say, just in general, when it comes to traditions, it says one may not expound the work of creation to more than one student at a time. The work of the chariot, not even to one student, unless he is wise and can understand these matters by himself. So certain limitations there. Okay. But before we jump into and talk about the Kabbalah, let's talk about what does the word Kabbalah mean? It means receiving or tradition, right? It is applied specifically to the esoteric, mystical tradition within Judaism. Of course, this definition really seems too general for our purposes, right? As Judaism has myriads, pleroma of possibilities. So cornucopia. So it doesn't really focus it in too much. Well, traditionally now, we're going traditionally about something that's considered tradition. Traditionally, we're back to, of course, this idea or the perspective that it goes to, they say, the 10, 1100s into the 1200s CE, and the area is southern France into Spain. And so that's what they'll say. And they'll focus in on, for example, Moses de Leon as a character, you know. So, but let's really think about this. So you would think, given this stereotype, that it started at this time in Spain, in southern France, that the famous Kabbalah Tree of Life with its, 10 Sephirot, right, uh, suddenly emerged autochthonically, immediately at a time without any previous precedence. Before I go any further into that, I just want you to sit back and think about that point. Kabbalah tree, right? The multiplicity of ideas and perspectives and concepts and so forth just suddenly out of nowhere emerged out of out of out of Muslim Spain and of course southern France. And you start to go, okay, Dr. Rietveld, I'm getting your point, right? It's too many components. It's too many pieces, right? And so too much to put together, right? It's like IKEA. You're trying to put it all together all at one time, right? The reality is that it's being put together little by little over a long period of time. There is a gradual evolution of it. And one thing I do guarantee you by the end of this talk, you will know exactly that evolution. You will know what step led to the next one, led to the next one, led to the next one. Isn't that nice to know? And then, of course, you can go ahead and take a look at your Kabbalah books and going, oh, wow, I have to add more to the introduction. They forgot to mention all of this. And there is a reason. Okay, I am an ancient scholar. My PhD is in ancient history and religion, ancient religion, archaeology, and so forth. So I focus on ancient history. The problem is, the difficulty is that many scholars of the Kabbalah, their expertise is the Middle Ages, right? It's the medieval era. That's their era. And because it's Western Europe, their expertise oftentimes goes into the Latin West conception, although they know the Arabic and so forth. That's their area of So what will happen is that almost they cut off this tradition, right at its root. As you know, it came from the East, but they focus too much on the West, and they don't know their ancient history. They don't know their ancient philosophy. And so they don't see these connections. By the time we finish this talk, you're going to see these connections that many of my fellow scholars don't know. It's no fault for theirs, but they're in the Middle Ages. Now there are some really good scholars. His name is Ken Wolf, for example, an excellent scholar who knows his ancient history, and he understands the Kabbalah, and that goes all the way back for him. He teaches at Pomona College. So there are people who know this. But here's the problem. Most people don't know this. The scholars talk amongst themselves, and there are many reasons for that. One of course, I mentioned is the fact that there are people who are medievalists. They're not ancient historians, so they don't have the tools necessary. And you have other scholars who are ancient historians who do know this, but the problem is they're oftentimes not very popular. They're not. And so it's not a popularity contest, but also makes people uncomfortable. So today we'll hear it. Okay. So here we go. Let's go a little bit further. So let's talk about, or let's get there. Let's go through a few facts about the Kabbalah. I want to go through a few facts because I want to establish certain ideas right up front. So you have those ideas imprinted in your mind. So when I go through this evolution, you can go, oh yeah, that's when that came about. Oh yeah, that's when that came about. So does that help? Okay, so here we go. So first of all, number one, first of all, of course, we talked about that. We talked about what the word means. It means receiving or tradition, right? And I said that maybe it's kind of too narrow. right? And there's many possibilities. Let's go to number two. Number two is for those who embrace the Kabbalah. God is the definitive and eternal transcendent one. He is the eternal transcendent one. He transcends, transcending as in moving from the spiritual realm, emanations of him moving towards the material realm. So moving, so emanations. So it's kind of like you have the sun, right? And then let's pretend the sun is God. The emanations would be like the rays of light coming from the sun. So they're emanating forth. And as you see, well, hopefully we're not looking directly into the sun because we would all be blind. But you could see these emanations, they go from the brightest, closest to the source, to being less bright as they move further and further into the material realm. So this is an idea that is understood in the Kabbalah. The other idea, of course, is that central conception connected to this is obviously the further up you go up, it's more pure spirit it is. So it's pure spirit. And as time goes on, or I should say, as the emanations move down, it becomes more and more mixed until it fractures into the realm of shells. Okay. All right. So there you have it. So ultimately, God is in existence, right? But he is beyond it, right? He's in existence, but he is beyond it. He is eternal. He is Ayin Sof. Ayin Sof. Ayin means no thing, not nothing, but no thing in Hebrew, right? Substantiating that God is not an object, right? It's not a thing to be touched. God is not located anywhere, right? No exact position for him, right? So he is beyond, yet he is within, right? He is outside, and yet he is also inside. So God is transcendent and he is immanent within nature. The word sof means end, means end. So together, Ein Sof means that God is without end. He's in all, right? Is this making sense? So you have this idea, right? This concept, right? And of course, God, this concept, he is, he is in all things, he's immanent, and he is perfect, right? Perfection. He is beauty, right? He is beauty. He is, he is light, right? He is light, right? So he is all of these things, right? Okay. Third, those who follow the Kabbalah believe that the world was created for a reason. There is a purpose for creation, a specific purpose. So why did God create the world, right? What is the reason for existence, right? In short, they will say God wishes to behold God. God wishes to behold God, to contemplate himself, right? So, he wants to, in a sense, the self reflection of the ultimate God, that which is Ein Sof, right, without end. In order to do this, he had to limit himself in order to contemplate his own gaze. You guys got it? So God wants to see himself. He wants to reflect upon himself. And so in order to do that, he has to create a reflection. He has to create a reflection. But that reflection, of course, has to be, in a sense, limited, be a reflection. It has to be something that's tangible, right? But which is first and foremost spiritual, but then, of course, becomes material. So it's, in a sense, when this happens, it appears as if in a mirror, right? So a mirror in the void is created, this mirror, in order for God to see himself. Like the kapodrezomenoi, as they say in Greek, right? Right? So in a sense, to contemplate, of course, kapodrezomenoi, it is a middle subjunctive. So the idea is that it's reflexive, right? So the idea is that you reflect upon yourself. You reflect upon yourself. And of course, that's another word for that would be contemplation. So he's able to reflect and contemplate, in that sense. Okay, you guys got it? Whew. This is pretty heavy stuff, I told you. By the way, this idea of the divine or the one or, the monad, as they call this, Ayin Sof, this idea is not unique to Judaism. We see this a lot in other traditions, right? We see these in other traditions. So it's beyond that. I just want to make it clear. And in fact, some of the ideas that we're talking about, aspects of it will come from other traditions. Aspects of it will come from Gnosticism. Aspects of it will come from Hermeticism. Aspects of it will come from Middle Platonism, and then, of course, Neoplatonism, right? Aspects of this will even come from the East. You have this mirror conception, right? If you guys are familiar with the yogas, right? You have the Raja Yoga, right? The stilling of the mirror of the self, right? And the reflections upon that. Isn't it fascinating? So, I mean, this is nothing new, right? Nothing new at all of this idea of the reflection aspect. But it is especially pertinent within Gnosticism. So we can go there a little bit later. I just want you to know that these ideas are there. Okay. Okay, moving right along, or maybe not. Continuing with this is that what happens is that he reduces himself, his eternity, into a limited reflection. Yet it must be remembered that this void was to show his face, right? But it was not meant to be all encompassing of his eternity, right? Because that's just not possible. So therefore, rabbis called this act of God to limit himself, zimzum, zimzum. Okay, so this is basically, it's an act of contraction. Okay, so number 4, for those who follow the Kabbalah, as well as Judaism and Christianity, right, in general, God is light. We went here. God is light. The Kabbalah states that God is the Ein Sofor, right? He is the endless light that illuminates the darkness of the void. You're going to see this concept, of course, in the introduction to the Gospel of John, for example. You're going to see this in Hermetic writings, right? So this is everywhere. This divine eternal light is purest and brightest at its source, but becomes less bright as it moves into the void, which we, of course, already defined, right? Now, it must be remembered that while God's light is in the world, it does not mean that he is always of the world in every way. Rabbis declared that God's place is in the world, but the world is not God's place. Okay? God's place is in the world, but the world is not God's place. So the light of God moved into the world through the power through of his divine will. Divine will. So got it here, right? The light moved, this eternal God, this one, this monad, this light moved into the world through the will. Will. That's important. You'll see where it goes later on. So it is the will of God that creates things. Well, this again goes back to early Judaism, right? This is nothing new, right? We see this in other religious traditions as well. Fifth, the world was created as a result of a series of emanations of power moving from God, emanations of power moving from God into the void towards the mirror. As, of course, eventually, at first, there will be these emanations. There will be 7 of them. I threw you off right there. Eventually, there will be 10 of them. I get you curious now. It's like, wait, what? I told you this is good, right? Okay. So, so yes. So these will emanate into the world, right? And they're called Sephira. Sephira. Some there's different ways. Sephirah. Obviously, in Hebrew, there's different letters. Sephira. I have a friend who says Sapphira. That's fine. These are arranged in descending order, and they are called sometimes the image of God, and sometimes they're connected to what's called the tree of life. As for the word Sephira, right, and of course Sephirot in the plural, uh, the meaning is controversial. There's lots of different possibilities. And people always argue about this. Some say it has the same root as sapphire and cipher. So, as a sapphire, it's connected to divine stones, and as a cipher, it's connected to divine numbers. Having said that, even though I'm smiling because you never know, I not it is true though. However, we know going back that these emanations, these powers that are within uh, these the radiance of God are connected to numbers. They are connected to different kinds of concepts and ideas and stones and so forth. So there is something to that, but there you have it. Right? The origins for the word. Well, we can go back and forth on that, right? By the way, many of you know that I was partly raised by a Holocaust survivor, um, Corey ten Boom. Probably don't know who she is, but I got to tell you that um, I was raised within this context, within there's obviously a Christian Jewish context, so we celebrated composite holidays. So, but I want to tell you something. I learned early on through that there within if you come from a Jewish background, you're smiling at me because there is beauty during the holidays of what's called the discussion. It's an argument. Oh, and I've been to some contexts of some pretty big doozies. So going over, pouring over the Torah, pouring over these words and what they possibly mean, and arguing and fighting about it was all part of the fun. It really was. Having come from a context that was surrounded by that. Anyway, so nitpicking these words, that's for another context. But hey, there's a place and time for that. There's even holidays, if you're Jewish, you know this, where you're just kind of meant to talk all night about these things. Okay, at least the men. Hopefully now women too. Obviously, things have changed. Thank goodness. Okay, okay. Number 6. Oh wait, I'm still doing number 5. I better go through here. Um, finish up number 5. So so basically, through their activity, right? So through the individual sephira or the sephirat, obviously as a group, through this activity, they um, are powers or instruments of God, and they act much like hands reaching into creation. Hands reaching into creation, right? Although some people would say that they're more like faces or garments of God, right? Number 6, despite this belief in numerous emanations or powers descending from God into the world, creating it along the way, and moving from the spiritual realm to the physical universe, God is viewed still as one and united. And so, the introduction to the Tukkane's Zohar makes it very clear, despite the apparent numbering of emanations via the Sephiroth, that God is always united and one. Elijah, I'm quoting now, Elijah opened and said, Master of the worlds, you are one, but not in number. You are he who is highest of the high, most hidden of the hidden. No thought can grasp you at all, and there is no image or likeness of you inside or out. And aside from you, there is no unity on high or below. And you are acknowledged as the cause of everything and the master of everything, and you are the completion of them. And as soon as you remove yourself from them, all the names, so again, as soon as you remove yourself from them, all the names remain like a body without a soul. All names remain like a body without a soul. This is referring to those powers, the Sephiroth, right? All is shown how you conduct the world, but not that you have known righteousness that is just, nor a known judgment that is merciful, nor any of these attributes at all. Blessed is God forever. Amen and amen. Okay, so there you have it. Number 7, regardless of how many of its outer trappings, the Kabbalah is most definitely rooted in the Hebrew Bible. It's rooted in the Hebrew Bible. I didn't say that it's not influenced by everything else. Its root, but as it grows, it takes on other traditions and ideas, right? And of course, it's rooted in the Torah, right? Which is, we say in English, the law. That sounds very Greek. The law is something that you read. It's something that's etched in stone. I like the word uh, Torah as being instruction, because that is something that is heard, and very much in the Hebrew tradition, it's very much what you hear, right? That's important, right? Now, while much of the Kabbalah centers around the book of Genesis as well as Exodus, it's surprising how much is also connected and a lot to the book of Ezekiel, written much later than the 5 books of Moses, right? Some say around 592 BCE, and this is, of course, supposedly taking place in Babylon, right? Ezekiel's face-to-face encounter with God's majestic presence, with the 4 cherubim and the 4 wheels besides them, as well as a wheel within a wheel, right? Okay, so now Judaism in general is based upon uh, 2 components for Kabbalists. Okay, so 2 components. One, of course, I said was obviously it's the Torah. But you have the physical Torah, the Hebrew Bible. That's what is seen, as well as the Talmud. The Talmud, of course, is composed between the 2nd and the 6th century CE. These are the collected works of Jewish law codes and extensive traditions. This is the first aspect. So this is kind of like this is the revealed Torah. So that what you see, this is the reveal. This is what you see. But the second one that's included in the roots are understood as the mystical Kabbalah, the secret mysteries that were handed down from Moses or earlier on, right? This is the hidden Torah. This tradition was not written down. It was passed down through oral tradition for only those who are considered worthy. So there are two types of knowledge. You have the revealed Torah and you have the hidden Torah. And when do these hidden teachings come about? Of course, you have Mount Sinai, and you have Moses, and of course you have the written Torah that comes about at that time or is believed, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, right? Going out, the Ten Commandments and so forth, yada yada. But those who believe the Kabbalah believe that Moses received some secret hidden teachings that were not written down or not put together, right? And in some cases, these mysteries, these secrets go back to the time of Adam and up to Noah and Abraham. They'll say that Abraham carried it to Isaac, who carried it to Jacob. Some say that it stopped with Jacob, that Jacob didn't know. Other people said, it didn't go to the 12 tribes of Israel, and then it was brought up again under Moses. These are the stories, but I'm just telling you their beliefs, right? Or historical stuff I'm going to be talking about for you. But then the other people say, well, what about Joseph in his Technicolor dream coat, right? Joseph, so maybe the coat represents the secret tradition of the Kabbalah being shared to Joseph. Who knows, right? But Ezekiel's also important, and of course, I would just read just a little portion of it. The word of the Lord came expressly unto Ezekiel, the priest, son of Buza, in the land of the Chaldeans, Babylon, by the river Cheddar. And the hand of the Lord was there upon him. And I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and a fire enfolding itself, and a brightness was about it. And out of the midst thereof, as the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire, also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man, and every one had 4 faces, and every one had 4 wings, and their feet were straight feet. The soles of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled with the color of burnished brass. And they had the hands of a man under their wings on their 4 sides, and the 4 had their faces and their wings, and their wings were joined together. They turned not when they went every one straight forward. And of course, we can keep going, but I just want to mention that this is part of the mystery, and that was beheld believed by Ezekiel, right? And so what happens is that these mysteries will become part of the Kabbalic tradition, right? In fact, the faces, 4 faces, 1 face of a man, then there's a face of a lion, and on the right side, and then the 4 had faces of an ox on the left side, and the face of an eagle. So you basically have, and this will be talked about in the Kabbalah, so I'll mention it again. So you have the face of a man, face of a lion, right? A face of an ox, and the face of an eagle in each one. So those who represent Kabbalic ideas that we'll get to later on. This is the holy aspect, right? And of course, then you have the revelation of God as a result of all this, right? And he says as follows, I saw, as it were, the appearance of fire, and it had brightness all around it. Actually, I want to go earlier. And above the firmament that was over their heads was a likeness of a throne, and as the appearance of a sapphire stone, and upon the likeness of the throne was a likeness as the appearance of a man upon it. And I saw as the color of amber, as the appearance of fire around about within it, and so forth and so on. Of course, and the revelation is then given to Ezekiel. So he is given a scroll, he's given a book, and he's asked to eat it. This is the mystical tradition. So he eats the book, and it's sweet like honey to his mouth, but it is bitter to his belly. And so there you have it. Those who follow the Kabbalah believe that so many of the mysteries of the Kabbalah were given at that moment. The mystical Kabbalah were given right at that moment when Ezekiel took in that holy scroll. You guys got it? Well, that leads out of Ezekiel. You guys have to follow this. Out of Ezekiel arises an entire Jewish mystical movement that comes about in the 1st century BCE. That's right. So Ezekiel, especially this moment, gives birth to an entire mystical tradition of Judaism known as Merkava. Merkava, Merkavah. Merkava. What does that mean? It means chariot, right? And of course, it's connected to the chariot upon which the throne of God was situated in Ezekiel's vision. So they believe that much like Ezekiel, they too could experience direct and real visions of God. They believe they could have a direct connection to God through this form of mysticism, right? Merkava movement, it wasn't very organized, right? No unifying force, really. The writings talk about how these visions of God can be possible, but it also mentions multiple layers of the heavens, multiple layers in the heavens. And in many cases, they will say that there are 7 heavens that emanate, and these 7 heavens are connected to the 7 spheres of the heavens. So each of these heavens are connected to the 7 spheres. But that God is the ultimate divine light, but that God is behind the veil, behind the veil of the material world. So you got God here, you got his light emanating out, you got the veil here, and then you have aspects of God coming down, right? Aspects of God, right? That's connected to these heavens, to these 7 spheres. Of course, you can see that there's something forming here, slowly, gradually. It's not there yet, but you got the veil, right? You got 1 above, and you got, 7 below. You guys are following so far. Don't worry, we'll go further, right? So what happens is that God, of course, is the ultimate divine light beyond the veil, right? So true knowledge is revealed directly through God, because God, he gives that will, and that will comes forth. And with that will, then arrives knowledge. And after that knowledge arrives feeling and connection. That's interesting, right? Now, of this knowledge, of course, only a few can receive it. According to the book of Sirach, it says, "Seek not out the things that are too hard for thee, neither search the things that are above thy strength. But what is commanded thee, think thereupon with reverence. For it is not needful for thee to see with thine eyes the things that are in secret." Right? So for how this information was transmitted, it needed to be restricted, 1 pupil per teacher. as we talked about before, right? By the way, you keep adding things that the pupil has to have. They have to be of a man of esteem, a counselor, a skillful craftsman, and one who understands secrets. Again, they get this from Isaiah 3:3. Meanwhile, as the Merkava mystical tradition started to develop, right, you have somebody else who's important that arrives into the scene. Very important. His name is Philo, Philo, Philo of Alexandria. Philo of Alexandria, he lived from 20 BCE to 50 CE. Yeah, 20 BCE to 50 CE. He's a famous Jewish philosopher who lived in Alexandria. Now, what's interesting here is that he is contemporaneous to the believed time of Jesus. Same time period, same era, right? And what he did is so important for the Kabbalah. I can't emphasize it enough. What he did is he blended Greek philosophy and interpretations with Jewish traditions. In Alexandria, what happened is there's a form of the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, becomes translated into Greek. And the Greek is known as the Septuagint, known as the Septuagint. The story goes is King Ptolemy of Alexandria, the rabbis, but he wants people are forgetting the Jewish language, and so in Alexandria, and there's a need for a Greek translation of the Bible. But anyway, so what the story goes is that 70 or 72 scribes are called in, put into 70 or 72 separate rooms, and each with the Torah in front of them, and they are all supposed to translate it into Greek. Miracle happens, and the 70 or 72 Bibles, copies that they make through the translations, they all match. So that's called the Septuagint. It is the majority of the New Testament is based upon the Septuagint translation, not the Hebrew one, not the Hebrew one. So much of Christianity arises from the Greek context of the Septuagint, not the Hebrew context of the Hebrew Bible. That's an important thing. But that same fertile ground of the Septuagint gives life to ideas within the Kabbalah, which is interesting because you have ideas of the Trinity within Christianity, which is, of course, you're going to find that that will eventually become agreed upon by when Theophilus of Antioch brings it up around 170 CE. Then, of course, he's the one who coins the word Trinity and so forth. But this idea of a multiplicity it's inherent within the Greek, is also found in the Septuagint form of the Bible. So this goes to the Jewish connections. You're going, well, it was multiplicity. Well, guess what? Hello, Kabbalah. Oh yeah, got it. Yeah, okay, you got it. Yeah, you have the three above, and oh yeah, all right, you're following now. Okay, so here it is. You're probably learning too much. You see why, as an academic, these ideas can be kind of unsettling. Not too bad, but it's interesting. So Philo believed that while there was a literal meaning of the Bible, there was allegorical interpretations, and that they had more deep, more profound meanings. He declared that to see God, have a mystical vision of God, was the ultimate goal, declaring that the beginning and the end of happiness is this goal. Going further, he said it was the most precious of all possessions. Philo emphasized the idea of divine transcendence, that God can be viewed within nature and emanating from the one, which is the monad. And that through that, emanating from that one, that monad, are many powers in succession, many powers in succession. And if you remember the introduction to this talk, hey, that's one of the points. It sure is. Okay, so Philo's bringing this in a big time into Judaism, right? divine transcendence, immanent within nature. This is Philo, but also the idea that you have these separate powers that emanate from this one. According to Philo, the reading of the Torah, of Scripture, for deeper mysteries was to be a full-time pursuit and endeavor, and of course would result in mystical experiences, right? This is, of course, a direct parallel to the teachings of the Kabbalah, where the reading of the Torah for its deeper mysteries is emphasized as a full-time pursuit to mystical revelation. But guess what? He goes further. Philo says that the seeker was to pursue, quote, looking through the words as through a mirror, through which the rational soul contemplates upon the transcendent beauty of concepts, unfolding and removing symbolic, I'm still reading him, the symbolic coverings, and bringing forth the thoughts into the light of day. Coverings. You guys are all, wait, no. This is the Kabbalah. This is the Kabbalic ideas. Yes, here it is, 1st century CE. It's there. It's already there. It's this, what I just read could be lifted from a basic book on the Kabbalah. Is this making sense yet? You guys getting this? As a result, one can see the invisible, he says, through the visible, right? Optene, right? Theaton, therones, right? So there it is, all out in Greek, right? It's all Greek to you. Oh, no. With God reaching down to humanity, providing visions, also humanity can gain visions by God by reaching upwards into his presence. Yet this vision is only gained through permission from God, and not solely through the merit of the seeker. Philo states that the soul has reason to fear ascending in its own strength to the sight of the existent one, ignorant as it is of the way, lifted up as it is by ignorance and by daring, for grievous are the falls that have been occasioned by lack of knowledge and excess of boldness. Philo also notes that humanity is by nature unable to receive the vision of God on their own because of their lack of perceptual components and abilities that can enable them to cooperate in such an epiphany. So God has to be involved in that. No, the seeker after truth can only envisage God through God, as light is seen through light. When God gives the permission, then grace fills the soul, and the soul is possessed by God and inspired. In fact, Philo talks about the fact that this possession, this fire, this feeling makes one have the sensation of being flushed. You're agitated by this heavenly intoxication, although he likes to call it sober intoxication. Sober intoxication through this meeting of God through this mystical system, right? He says it makes us rejoice and smile and dance, right? The soul is stirred and goaded it as if it were in ecstasy, right? So Philo then taught that the makeup of the human mind constituted an inseparable fragment of the divine Logos through this agency of the Logos from the One. It's like, what? So what happens is that Philo talks about that there's these powers that come forth that lead out. And of course, one aspect is the craftsman, the Logos, because God through his will speaks, and that is the word. And the word, of course, in Greek is Logos. Wait, that's the same in Christianity. I know Christianity will have that same idea brought forth, but Christianity will identify the Logos with Jesus Christ. It won't be not here in Judaism. But wait a minute, Dr. Rietveld, you already have this Logos system within Judaism? Yes. Well, but it goes away. Well, no, it becomes something else. What does it become? A Kabbalah. Oh no. Yeah, okay. Again, because it's going to be because it's one of the many powers that come forth. Is this interesting? Right? So So Philo, of course, describes how Moses receives these mysterious teachings upon Mount Sinai, just like we have in the Kabbalah. Philo says God, okay, and king of the whole nation, entered into the darkness where God was, that is, into the unseen, invisible, incorporeal archetype essence of existing things. Thus he beheld what was hidden from the sight of mortal nature, and in himself and his life displayed for all to see, has set before us like some well-wrought picture, a piece of work that is beautiful, godlike, and he says a model paradigma for those who are willing to copy it, minus my, right? Happy are those who imprint or strive to imprint that image, typos upon their souls, for it were best that the mind should carry the forms, eidos, of such virtue in perfection. Okay, so yes, what is this? It's called Platonism. It's Plato. This is Middle Platonism. Middle Platonism, this Greek philosophy that arrived originally from Plato, is now entering Judaism, and because it's entering Judaism, it's creating a context for the Kabbalah. There can be no Kabbalah today without this Middle Platonic conception. I want to tell you that. You can't get it without this component. And this, of course, will go to the Merkava tradition as well. And as much as they try to exercise the Greek tradition, especially in the rabbinic period, it continues on through the mystical tradition of the Kabbalah. You just can't get rid of it. It's there. It's imprinted upon them, right? Philo himself, of course, entered this mystical state many times. He talks about the symbolism, the allegory behind the narrative, and so he believes this very much so. Again, this is all within what he will see, though, is that he will connect the idea of, he'll call it the noetic cosmos, the noetic cosmos, filled with the intelligible forms and ideals that will be copied further on down the emanation sequence. So what will happen here is that you have, of course, the noetic cosmos are viewed as powers, yet all these powers are not separate from the mind of God, but are within it, act in accordance with its will, and magnify the glory of its all-encompassing deity. Okay, they are and of course, Philo talks about there are three that are in the beginning, that are, of course, above the veil, right? And so how does he see this? Philo sees them as follows. They are one and living, true God. There's two supreme primary powers. You have goodness, which is the creative side of God. It is the creative side of God. So it is that which creates, and it has authority, which is that which organizes and restrains. Right. And of course, both are then governed by the logos, which is the word or the will of God, comes forth and binds them together. Yes, I know you're seeing the connection there with the Kabbalah as well. Philo's already coming up with these ideas; they are still there. Oh, there's so much more, but we'll have to keep going from Philo to the Merkava tradition. It continues on during the Roman period. There is one of the famous ones is Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is so important to the Kabbalah tradition that I'm going to talk about him for a short period of time. He's a famous transmitter of the oral Jewish traditions towards the end of the first century into the second century. So he lived between 50 to 135 CE. He contributed to the creation of the Mishnah, the Midrash Halakha, right? Declared by, by the connected, of course, to the Talmud. According to various sources, Akiva was poor. He was an illiterate shepherd. who fell in love with Rachel, a, a beautiful daughter of a wealthy man in Jerusalem. This is before Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 CE. According to the Talmud, Rachel promised to marry Akiva if he dedicated his life to studying the Torah. And of course, he didn't know how to read or write. So he was just a shepherd. So I'm not sure if that's going to happen. Well, Akiva agreed, but the father didn't, and disowned the daughter. Well, they get married, and life is really tough. They don't have a lot of money. So she shaves her head in order to provide for wigs to sell, in order for them to survive, to eat, right? And so how in the world does he get the money to be able to study through all this? Well, what happens is that um, Rabbi Akiva he gets a loan from a pagan woman, and then he can't repay it, and she's like all upset. Like, I need the money back. But good news, she was right at the seaside at that time, upset that she wouldn't get paid back. And what happened is uh, the daughter of a Roman emperor, she threw her treasure overboard, and it went into the water and arrived on the shore just in that time. And it was just enough money, actually a lot more money, to cover those needs. And later on, she was ashamed and gave it to him. Yeah. Well, anyway, so he studies. Finally, he's able to study the Torah. They agreed upon 12 years. So he'll stay. He'll go away from his wife. He'll study for 12 years. So he goes off and studies for 12 years. Then he's walking back to see his wife, and he overhears his wife say, "Oh, you know what? I don't really, I'm not sure if I want him back. You know, you know." And so he hears this from outside the walls of the house. So he turns around and he leaves, and he's gone for another 12 years. At that point, he becomes really famous, and he comes back home, and he wants to hug his wife. And he's all of these followers were around him, supposedly 24,000 followers of his disciples, and they're wanting to know why he's hugging this woman that he doesn't even know. It's like, no, this is my wife. No, this is not some strange woman. Anyway, so Rabbi Akiva is known to be pretty, very important. And he does spend some time in Babylon. He spent some time in Rome. He spent some time in Palestine. He's looked at as really wise. How wise is he? He's so wise that one time, Rabbi Akiva is sharing these mysteries of Moses, and Moses kind of finds out he's in heaven, and he's put he's kind of it's kind of a time travel story. Moses is placed on a bench on the outer ring where of the lecture hall of where Rabbi Akiva is talking, and supposedly Rabbi Akiva is talking about what Moses gave, but Moses has no idea what he's talking about, no idea whatsoever, and because the ideas of what Moses talked about changed throughout time. More stuff has been added, more nuances. And Moses says, why did you choose Rabbi Akiva? And why did you choose me? Rabbi Akiva seemed to be better as a lawkeeper, the one to give the law to. And of course, obviously, God says, no, this is part of his plan. Okay. Rabbi Akiva, other stories, we covered that one, is that he is connected to the Merkavah tradition, although many of these works are very apocalyptic, and they remind me of the Dead Sea Scrolls. They do connect to Ezekiel, all right, and the visions of God, as we talked about before. Now, the Jewish, accordingly, this tradition, right? The journey to the vision of God was not easy, and it could even be dangerous. So they had to move up through the seven heavens with their seven throne rooms. And if they were not absolutely pure, they could be injured. They could even be killed on the ascent upwards. Now, the palaces are arranged in concentric circles, with each one within the other, 7 in all. Each palace has a gate and an inner chamber, accordingly. the Jewish mystic must now know to get into each gate, which is guarded by 8 angels, 4 on each side of the entrance. You have to know the name of the angels, and you have to not only memorize their names as these are powers of God, but you have to also say special words along with it. At the same time, you got to realize that demons are also guarding these gates as you move up through these concentric circles, through these various palaces. So you have to also memorize, in a sense, words or magic, right, to ward off that which is evil. So I'll give you the translations. The 7 palaces were known as brightness, merit, right, essence of heaven, love, pavement of sapphire, divine will, the holy of holies, and of course, obviously, then the glory of God. As for the 7 heavens that are matched with these 7 palaces, right? You have dwelling. That was, of course, the celestial Jerusalem, the firmament, and that was, of course, the 7 planets: Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars, right? You have residence. You have curtain, which has, of course, clouds, winds, air, stars. You have emplacement, and finally, you have planes. And that was, of course, the throne of God that's surrounded by the seraphim. So are you seeing this? What's happening here? It's like, wow, you got the 7 powers, you got the veil. So you're having the architecture of the Kabbalah. It's already here. I'll just mention a little detail about one aspect. Upon the entrance to the 6th palace, the ascending mystic experiences a vision of thousands upon thousands of waves of water. Yet in reality, there's not a single drop of water there, only the radiance of marble stones with which the palace is furnished. So, but the unworthy, when they arrive, they could be killed or at least injured by their perception of this illusion. And so they have to move beyond it. When you get to the 7th gate, the 7th palace is described. They have giant horses who eat hot coals in their mangers for food and are able to drink waters of flame. The Merkava works, there's quite a few of them. But I want to mention you have, of course, the Sephar Helicat, right? Which is understood as 3rd Enoch. It's quite interesting. It tells the story of Enoch's ascent into heaven, and including his entire transformation. Of course, obviously, what will happen is, of course, Enoch rises to heaven on a chariot sent by God for his righteousness upon earth. But in the book of Enoch, he is turned into an angel known as Metatron. This Enoch, whose flesh was turned to flame, his veins to fire, his eyelashes to flashes of lightning, his eyeballs to flaming torches, and whom God placed on the throne next to the throne of glory. So you're going to have this. Now, one of the greatest, though, here we go. We're there. Moment. I want to at least get here. I know time is getting close, but I want to make sure we at least get here. We have the Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation. This book, in general, they will say it's composed between the 2nd to the 6th century CE, the 2nd to the 6th century. But those who study it for textual analysis have determined that the Hebrew, the grammatical forms, correlate to the typology that we find in the Mishnah. So really, this work is dated between 180 to 220 CE. So what is this? By the way, we also know that the Babylonian Talmud refers to this text. So we know it associates it with a high level of mysticism. So, and I do have the quote here, right? According to legend, this was This work was composed by Abraham himself. So this work itself claims to be composed by Abraham. But what will happen is many will say, no, it was written by perhaps Rabbi Akiva or some other mystic from this time, from the 2nd into the 3rd century. According to the Sefer Yetzirah, God created the universe through 32 wondrous ways of wisdom. 32 wondrous ways of wisdom. These are pathways. They go between the 32 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And these 10 numbers are called Sephirot. Wait, there's 32 roads to wisdom moving through the tree of life. And there are 10 Sephirot descending from God to the realm of the material. Yep, here it is. There it is. But Dr. Rietveld, it's in the 2nd and 3rd century. I thought it was Spain. 10th, 11th century. Oops. Oops. Also, it describes these emanations arising from God as from the Ruach, from the Spirit, as both the Spirit and the element of air. The element of air, in turn, created the element of water. From element of water, then arose the element of fire. And these 3 elements are considered the 3 primordial Hebrew letters. They're called the mother letters, and these are the 3 above. You mean there's already a triad conception? 3 above. So once again, of course, you can see the connections here, and then of course, moving down, you're going to have what about the element of earth? Well, that's down in the material world down below, the earth element. So water, fire, air is above, but the material realm is down below, the earth. See, so that's why it's sectioned off. So it's not part of the 3 at all. And of course, they make connections here in many ways, in many paths, right? As you see these elements, they will make these connections. Then, what about the 7? Well, these are connected. These are powers. They are powers, and they are faces of God, also garments of God, and they also correspond to the 7 planets, and they also correspond to the 7 days of week. And they also correspond to each, now get this, you'll love this. They also correspond to different parts of the body, different parts of the body. Wow. Okay. So this is all here already. Is this interesting? Yeah. Okay. So there you have it. Now, obviously, it moves down to the material world. I know I'm looking at my time. Okay, so you got the 3 elements. You got the various letters, the 22 letters of God, the various pathways. These are the roads up and down, energy ways, right? That goes back and forth. Obviously, there's a lot of this is connected to Gnosticism, but I don't have time to talk about that, right? And I would just say that there are, I would just mention a few things here and there. I'll mention the Christian Gnostic by the name of Marcus, but in his case, although it's similar in the architecture, he has 24 Greek letters, and that's into 3 groups based upon 9 mutes, 8 semi-vowels, and 7 vowels. And of course, it includes even a logos until you have, anyway, above it. Also, we see this in Jewish writings that are contemporaneous, known as the Clementine literature, which dates to the 4th century CE. Just like the Sefer Yetzirah, it taught that God was the beginning and end of existence. The Clementines also assert that the arche and the teleos of all exists. The spirit emanates from the elements, with first air, then water, and finally fire.
but also asserts that the Spirit of God first created the element of air, then water, then fire, and then, of course, obviously, earth. And then, of course, it goes down into the various dimensions down below. And so these ideas continue. One more thing I want to bring up is that during the same period of time, another idea of the Kabbalah comes about, and that is during the rabbinic period, around the Sea of Galilee, around the first and second centuries, you're going to have the development, right? The development of four different ways of understanding the Torah, the four different ways. And this will go into the Kabbalah. And first of all, the first level is the Bishat, which is the milk rather than the meat. This is the direct, obvious meaning of the Torah, right? The next level is called Remez. This is the hint. So that added meaning here is hinted at, but something else is going on. The third level is Dross, which is, of course, homiletics, right? So these are each one of this. So you read something and it's connected to a story that was memorized, that's in connection to the passage of the Bible. And finally, the deepest, is Sod, which means secret. It's the mystical level of the Torah, the mysteries of the universe. And this right here is part of the received tradition of the Kabbalah. And there it is. These four levels of the Torah, they create an acronym. In our phonetic language, it would be P, A, R, so it's P, then R, D, S. So P, R, D, S. We put the vowels in between, and it becomes the idea of the Hebrew word meaning the orchard. So one will now enter into the orchard, where one can go through the four different levels of interpretation and understand what really is this mystical tradition. There's a story that Rabbi Akiva, Ben Zoma, Ben Azai, and Elisha entered into this orchard, but the mysteries were a little bit too much, these secrets. Ben Azai lost his life. Ben Zoma lost his mind. Elisha lost his faith, and only Rabbi Akiva left this sacred grove uninjured, and he received the knowledge. Now, of course, we're going to. This idea is that it is a living text. There's something more to it. We see this also in the Zohar as well. And they will say there's as many as 600,000 interpretations. So there is a deeper level. Okay. And of course, now we're getting to an interesting situation. And that is, I know we only have 6 minutes. Maybe you'll give me a few more minutes. But I just want to say a few things. Now we enter an interesting situation where these ideas, they go into the period of time of course, the Umayyad and the Abbasids. And then these traditions go along the coast of North Africa and then will appear in Spain. That's the route through which these ideas travel. So Spain is receiving these traditions, but these traditions, much of them are already formulated. They're already there. And remember, this whole area going from the Damascus area in Syria and so forth, across Egypt, across what is now, as we know, is Libya, going all the way to Algeria, Morocco, and to Spain. Remember, this is all under Muslim rule. And it's very tolerant, and it's allowing it for it, of course, to grow. Now we have people. Now, so these traditions are circulating, but they're not very well organized, right? They're just a nice big mix. So now we get to Isaac the Blind, 1160 to 1235. He's from Provence in France. He supposedly composed the Bahir, although, of course, he'll attribute it to a first century rabbi. He will, but Of course, the question is, was Isaac really blind? Well, some people say, no, it's not that he was blind, because how in the world did he study these traditions, but that he was so enlightened that he was blinding to be seen. There's so much light that's emanating from him. Such a good soul. Now, I got to tell you this. I want to make it clear. Looking at them here, which of course is the root of our understanding of the Kabbalah today, and going into, of course, from there to the other traditions, right? But I want to mention this: is that if you do a textual analysis of this work is stitched together. It has different kinds of compositions all over. In fact, there's places where ideas end, even sentences end. So people say he made this up out of nowhere. No, it is stitched together. It has so many different places it arises from. So he took a whole bunch of these pieces and he kind of threw them all together. And there you have it, right? So they'll be here. So, of course, now, emanating the first Sephirah, of course, is you have the idea of crown, right? Emanating from God, which in turn gave birth to Chokmah, which wisdom, which from there emanated Binah, which is intelligence. And so you now have the three Sephirot that emanate, then seven Sephirot from which all material beings are formed. And so there you have it. Now you're getting the right words with the right names, supposedly, right? By the way, the Kabbalah here does teach about reincarnation. It's interesting. It's there that you have one soul just going over various lifetimes, but these lessons are deeply imprinted within us. And even though we supposedly do not remember these previous lessons, if we follow the Kabbalic path, we will attain to the secret of these memories and unlock them. So I think that's fascinating, right? So the lessons of life are imprinted upon the soul. These memories, they're called rishamat, actually never leave us. But our soul may receive many corrections to kill them along the way. Okay, so we have this. Now, Isaac the Blind was a teacher of Maimonides, right? And so who also firmly believed in the idea of the hidden Torah. He lived from 1194 to 1270, right? And I know I'm looking at my time. And of course, he talks about the things that all things are created out of non-corporeal substance, and goes into this at length, but talks about the powers and the goes in there. Okay, and then of course we move on to the famous Zohar, right, which translates as the Book of Splendor, right? And Jewish tradition asserts that the Zohar was compiled by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, supposedly in the 2nd century CE. But of course, once again, most likely not. But by the way, this is I know I want to tell the story of this rabbi, but I know I can't. But I don't have time. But I just want to say, even though it's not attributed to him, I just think it's interesting. It's an interesting story where he gets himself in trouble with the Romans, and so he and his son hide in the cave, and for years. And because they don't want to show their nakedness, they bury themselves up to their necks in soil until that emperor dies. Anyway, I'm moving right along. So, but in reality, most likely this was composed by Moses de Leon between 1240 to 1305. He resided, of course, in Muslim Spain. And with Moses de Leon, we all get the Kabbalah that we're most familiar with. I just want to say one more thing about this, and I want to do a quick review on something. Okay, so give me something here. Moses de Leon, he determined to fight against those known as the rationalists within Judaism at that time, who embraced Aristotle, which of course they're connected to, in a sense, a similar movement at that time in Christianity known as scholasticism, which also embraces the ideas of Aristotle. But he wanted instead to embrace something that is more passionate, more mystical. It's interesting because the Kabbalah is Platonic. It's Plato. It's Plato, not Aristotle. Although you have Aristotelian, adaptations. So you can see that the ancient origins, the Middle Platonic origins, are coming out here, and they are being used to contrast against this Aristotelian tradition. So there you have it. Of course, there's a story where people were saying, wanting to find the original portions of the Torah that Moses the Leon translated. He had long passed, his widow was there, and the widow says, well, I have nothing to show because basically he wrote it himself. We have these stories. It's possible, right? But, lots of possibilities. Now, I want to finish up and just talk about a few more concepts about the Zohar. There are three primordial gravitational forces that are infused within the essence that the Sephiroth bring together within the emanations arriving from the Holy God. These are called Zazahat, or hidden splendors. First, the Sephiroth are held together by and through divine will, which strives to keep the Sephiroth in balance and in control and in equality. It acts as a moderating force, and that is in the middle, right? The second Sephiroth, the second Zazahat, hold the Sephiroth all together on the masculine side, which is mercy, which is the creative force, the power of activity. Remember, we came across that with Philo of Alexandria. Yeah, I know. And the third Sephiroth held together through the divine rigor, which is feminine, and that is more passive, and that is the restraining aspect, right? And we saw that also authority. We saw that also within Philo. So you have these ideas holding the Sephiroth together, right? You got the will. You got, of course, the mercy, which is masculine, and then you got rigor, which is feminine, and this moves all the way through. Okay, so we've covered quite a bit of the origins of Kabbalah. We've talked about in a sense, the spiritual architecture that it is, and to conclude, I just want to give a very quick run through, and it'll be very quick, of an aspect, or I should say, of the table as it exists today, and then I will be able to sleep tonight because it's been a long day, right? So we talked about the Zazahat and the splendors. So basically, you have at the top, you have Keter, which is crown. This is located at the very top middle of the tree of life, and so falling under the domination of divine will of the three Zazahat, right? It is the realm of will. We talked about the importance of will, right from the beginning, right? This is beyond comprehension, right? It's connected to the head. Then you have Chokmah, wisdom. It's located at the right. This Sephiroth, located to the Sephiroth, located to the right, and so falls under the realm of dominion of divine mercy. This is inspiration. This is genius. This is revelation. It's very free. This is divine knowledge. It is masculine, right? It takes the will of Keter and shapes it, right? This is the realm. This is the brain. The Binah is now, of course, on the left. This is feminine. This is divine, connected to the divine rigor of the Zazahat. This is divine knowledge and thought, but this is the balancer, right? It seeks logic to discern its meaning so that this knowledge is received carefully, reflected upon, and perceived what it really is. So it's cautionary. This is also the realm of the brain. And of course, I want to make sure you know this. Next is the divine triad, which we talked about. Then you have well, this veil, which we talked about, and they call it the veil of the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, right? Located in the middle. And so it's a moderating force connected to the will. And so therefore, it is, in a sense, the invisible Sephiroth that's not counted, right? But it represents the idea of the translation of this knowledge and balancing it. Then, of course, we move down. Located at the right, you have Hesed, mercy, right? Which, of course, again, this is now emotional, love, generosity, toleration, connected to the right arm. Guvara, which is justice, right? This is feminine. Discernment, logic. This is left arm. Teferet is holding the center. That's beauty, divine will, emotional heart. This is the emotional now heart that holds things together. And then you have Neza, eternity, victory at the right, right? This is, of course, this is obviously at the right leg. It's the realm of action. This is altogether the realm of action. You have Hod, reverberation, splendor. This is, of course, feminine, complacency, acceptance, left leg. And then you go down to Yusod, foundation, center, divine will, purity, dreams, sexual organs. And then Malkut, kingdom, center, divine will. This is the earth. This is the body. And then, of course, you have, this is divided. All these are divided in different groups. This is the tree of knowledge, right? And, of course, below that, you have the realm of shells, right? You have the realm of shells. So as everything that emanates forth, there is another realm that plunges in to the material world all the way down. And so there are stories that the glory of God was filled up in various receptacles. And they're so filled up that they exploded. And so they're like shell-like. And so they're at the very bottom and they reflect the light because they're broken in almost like an illusion. They're all shadows, aspects that are beyond comprehension. They confuse us. And there's many theories on this. I will just say that Isaac Luria will talk about this, 1534 to 1572. And this he describes it as an explosion. It's God who emanates forth, and by the time it gets down there, it's like this explosion. And this is the origin of evil. And of course, one aspect of evil is the questioning of the unity of God. So you have this multiplicity, and so this, in a sense, translates the idea that this multiplicity says, well, it's God is one, So this is idol worship to believe that God is many, And so this is evil. But why would God allow evil? Well, the whole point is that the idea is God is trying to understand Himself. Well, he is understanding Himself in the process, not trying. He's understanding Himself, and in this reflection, you're going to have this, because how can you have unity without having the contrast to multiplicity? And so this acts as a reflection for God to know, and who does always know, and always will be knowing, and always has known, of His oneness and transcendence and immanence within nature. Thank you. There we go.
Thanks, James.
There we go.
You have questions in the chat.
Oh, I do?
Oh.
Oh, okay. Right. Oh.
Yeah. Kristen Dwan wants to know if you could do an 11-week class on the Sephiroth, where you focus on one week for each of the Sephiroth.
Well, I mean, I understand it. I'm not sure if I'm qualified. As an ancient historian, I can give you origins and ideas. I don't know. Well, maybe we'll think about it.
I'll think about it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I will
and I would love
contemplate
it. I would love it if you would add in Da'ath, because not many people talk about that. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about that one for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my speech is really long, so I did half of it. I did the first half, but I figured, that's good because I think the first half most people have not heard, right? Most people very quickly don't know about the fact that where the Kabbalah comes from. We just take it for granted. Does it seem clear the evolution of how ideas came about? Yeah. One by one, maybe.
There's more questions.
Okay, Erica asks, can you please tell us which is the best text to learn about reincarnation in Kabbalah?
The Zohar. always the primary texts. Always. So yeah. So there's references in the Zohar and other works about reincarnation. Yeah. So it's in there. There's a lot in there. Yeah. Like I said, my whole field is ancient history. So as an ancient historian, I gave you my contribution where these ideas connect. But when it comes to applications, obviously for me, so much theoretical. So
Okay, Zach Anderson asks, would love to hear your take sometime on the notion that Hegel was influenced by Kabbalah and Hermeticism.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, what's going to happen is that a lot of individuals are influenced by Kabbalah. In fact, I'll go further. You know that I'll go here. Platon was influenced by the Kabbalah. So Platon, of course, is very famous. He is the one who brought Platonism back to the West. That really spurred on the Renaissance. Platon, he went through some time of wandering. He ended up in the Muslim court in the Ottoman Empire, and he learned all about mystical Judaism and, of course, Kabbalistic ideas. And those ideas, he actually creates his own religion based on aspects of that, which is a mixture of has Neoplatonism mixed in there. But it's so funny because but these ideas are very much a part of the intellectual world of Europe because scholars brush shoulders with scholars, and you got Jewish scholars brushing shoulders with Gentile scholars, and they interact and they have conversations. But also, I want to bring up that Hegel is connecting with Platonism too, and so sometimes it's hard to detect where the Platonism ends and the Kabbalah begins. That's a quotable. You can quote me on that one. Like, does that make sense? Because now the more for those who have taken my been in my classes when it comes to talking about Plato, you know what I just talked about with the Kabbalah. You're going, hey, this is Platonism. This is right down. Yeah, it sure is. It certainly is. So that's so the point is that sometimes what connects to many of these scholars is the Platonic aspect of the Kabbalah, and you're going to see this in many different systems. And of course, I guess I'm answering your question. Any other questions? Thank you. That was one of my favorites. Nobody will be there for it, but I love my Platon talk. Because here's one guy that changed the world.
Mm-hmm.
He just he was just he was the right place at the right time. He was supposed to bring peace between the East and the West, the Greek East and the Latin West. The Byzantine Empire starting to disappear at this time.
because being surrounded by the Ottomans, they need to have alliance with the West. He ends up, at a peace accord. Even though they consider him a heretic, he's best at describing emanations of powers, right? And so he's really good at it. I wonder how he got, so Platonism and of course these other teachings. So he's talking. So because it's controversial about the idea of how the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit emanate from one another, he was at this council to argue. He got bored, and he started wandering around the streets of Florence, and he ended up in the court of Cosimo de' Medici, and Cosimo loved him, and ended up setting up a school dedicated to his knowledge, Plato's Academy, and brought Plato, and of course those ideas really were the starting point of the Renaissance. And he just went back home. I'll start the Renaissance and go back home. And that's what he did. Yeah, why not? And he's a fascinating figure, oblivious. By the way, he also gave Strabo's geography to a map to somebody about showing that the world was round, but not only that, but how to go around it. And then, of course, this map landed up. This guy gave it to somebody by the name of Christopher Columbus. I know. Like I said, he just kind of stumbles around and changes the world and just goes away. He makes up his own religion with emanations. And anyway, I'm going forever. That's a fascinating talk. If you guys Plathon, yeah. Any other questions?
The part where they were talking about people's heads exploding or something like that, or they're dying.
The glory of God is filling these vessels, and they become so overflowing that they explode. Yes, and they turn into fragments, and so they become a multiplicity. Because they become a multiplicity, they become imperfect, and this imperfection is shown in there's many as opposed to the one. But this is not true. This is a lie, because ultimately they are supposed to be a reflection of the one. So these are shells. This is the realm of shells that cover the glory of God.
Huh.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So there. So that's so exploding. And these 4 different levels in the realm of shells. So because they hide the truth, supposedly, shells. They also call them peels, like the peel of a fruit. So the fruit of God is there, but the peel covers that glory.
Wow.
So the real fruit is there, and so these shells, these peels, they're covering the possibility of God's glory, and so they're getting in the way. Right. So these are distractions. And they also talk about these sparks that get plunged into the realm of shells, which could be souls that have lost their way, have lost their light, and have succumbed into this darker realm of hopelessness. And there's this desire to, of course, you have to help them, bring them back. There's a way back. And those are the ones who fall into believing in the multiplicity as opposed to the one, because the one is immanent within the all. Sounds kind of animistic, doesn't it?
Sounds like Plato.
I know it is.
The allegory of the cave.
Yeah, I know. I wanted to bring that up too. It is the allegory of the cave. And this is where ancient scholars and philosophers need to hang around people who are into the Kabbalah and have that conversation. And that's what makes this talk today not completely unique, but unique within the popular context. So scholars talk about this all the time. They write papers about it. They do symposiums. They talk about themselves. Meanwhile, the general public is like, huh? What? So the Kabbalah, it started in the 11th, 12th century, and it's strictly Jewish mysticism. It's like,
You're going to make my head explode.
yeah, and of course, yeah. Then all these people who are ancient scholars go, I don't have time to go to do that symposium. I don't, we're busy enough as it. Ancient scholars are busy enough arguing about amongst themselves. Let alone, getting in with the medievalists. They're having battles. And I had to tell you, he's a wonderful guy. I went to college. His name is Ken Wolf. He kind of he knows his ancient history, he knows his medieval history, and he's like this stands in between these groups that just don't seem to want to get along.
Yeah, we all
You
just
know? Can't we just all get along? Just see the oneness, that's Islam, sorry, the oneness of all things. Of course, there's connections with this. Oh, I can't go here with this and Sufism, and of course with ideas connected to Ruby. Some of these ideas are there too.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering, since they did spend a lot of time in Muslim Spain, like you can't be surrounded by that culture and not cross-influence each other. So there's got to be.
Yes, so you do have these interesting tie-ins. Yeah, people have conversations. That's what people do. They do that along the trade routes, just as people, as I said before, exchange commodities like spices and carpets and incense. They also trade the wares of religion, and they have these conversations, and they go both east and west. So there is no straight orthodoxy until it's all casual, until somebody goes around and says, you know what, we got to codify this. We got to make this is the authentic text. And so that's why here's a problem when it comes to the textual transmission or to the ideas of the Kabbalah. It's really fluid. Did you guys notice that? It's really fluid for a period of time. The Merkavah tradition, it's not really organized. All those ideas are there. You're having these ideas also inherent within those who are Jews who still are connected to the Platonic traditions, right? And even though they cut off the tether of the Septuagint, and that actually starts at the Council of Diana, right, in the later part of the 1st century CE, but it becomes solidified by the time we get to the 2nd and 3rd century, and it's like no more Greek knowledge, destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE, we've fallen again. We're not going to do that. And so they start rejecting the Greek Septuagint, and of course, obviously embrace the Hebrew, obviously Aramaic. The problem is that they still retain, even in those languages, these Platonic ideas. They're still there, and they're obviously there. But they're spread out, and they're they're all over the place, right? So we get to Isaac the Blind. Yeah, he's dealing with lots of fragments, lots of these ideas. Do we have these fragments? Of course, we have fragments from all over the ancient world. There's a beauty to this. It's called these ideas are going across dry areas that preserve papyrus and parchment. So yeah, scholars know of these ideas, and we can even connect some these concepts or American tradition, especially in Babylon, into Baghdad, right? We have that there, and if you're familiar with the Umayyads and the Abbasids, right? It's all there, it's there. But then again, now we have a problem. A lot of scholars have this. It's like, but that means we have to go to a archive in Iraq, in Iran, in Syria. Something tells me it's a little difficult to do research right now in those areas. Are you following me? So some of those missing pieces, and then you got to learn a whole lot of different languages, right? So you got to know your Arabic, right? But you got to know your Aramaic. You got to know your Syriac. You got to know, this list of languages, right? And it's like, wow, you got to be a real specialist. A lot of people don't want to be that specialist because it takes years. I mean, for me to be in my field, it took me from I started my college education at 1985, and I finished in 2006. So yeah, it takes years and years and years, and then all we think about now is, can we get tenure? Trying to publish articles to survive, fight and flight, freeze kind of responses. And so, yeah, it takes a long time to get there. And then we don't have enough lifetime to actually share everything or publish everything correctly. And then I've had fellow scholars. It's so sad. They have spent their entire lives learning these archaic languages. This is so sad. This is actually a true story. Archaic languages and ideas. And then they arrive at the monastery where they're supposed to be, where those manuscripts are, and they arrive and they say the wrong thing, and the monk says, "I'm sorry." What? I'm sorry. That's it. You're not going to go again. Or they say, "Okay, you got an hour. Here's a pencil, and you can't take your computer." It's like my whole life. What am I going to do? And so you have this happening, and it's sad. So much of these connections or tie-ins to these mystical traditions in the Middle East are difficult to access. Is that making sense? Thank you, Sonia, for coming. Does that make sense? So that means that we have to follow the path across North Africa. Well, good luck on that one. Why? Well, you got Egypt. That's okay. Next to it, you got a place called Libya. You got Tunisia. You got Algeria, right? You got Morocco's okay. So we have some problems, right? We have some problems when it comes to transmissions of knowledge, but we do have enough, and I demonstrate this. We have enough to know that these traditions continued on and went to Spain. So Spain is not inventing these ideas. These ideas are already well formed, but it doesn't have the exact names. Yeah, but they have close to the same spiritual architecture, right? What I read in Philo of Alexandria, so much of that are the ideas of the Kabbalah. It's all there. In fact, I had a few more pages I didn't even read, even more connections, right? And you have this structure, right, of this idea of creation, right, and this idea of restraint, right? It's already there. He already talks about it. It's already part of the emanations. It's already part of the powers, right? There's a moderating force, which I don't have time to talk about, which is the logos, which is the will that holds both together. That's there too. Well, that's in the Zohar. There it is. It's already there, right? You already have also the connections to different parts of the body and the planets and they, of course, I didn't go further. I connected also to rocks and right. Remember the gems and the Hebrew letters, for heaven's sakes, right? And the various paths, right? The number adds up. It's exactly the same, and there are ways between each one. It's like how much more evidence do we need? But there it is. So much of the Kabbalah, it is there. And it's, and again, you could see why this is a difficult talk because you notice I mentioned, they claim this work was written by this person, but it's written really by that person. I said that quite a bit today, I know a lot of people expected me to use those as the earlier sources, saying, this rabbi wrote it in the first century. No. I'm not going to go there. I give you a whole new group of people to worry about. Don't worry about those people, the ones that are not mentioned. And I think Philo of Alexandria. By the way, good idea if you ever want to. They have a cheap form. A book of Philo of Alexandria. Its complete works are what we have. It's really cheap. It's available. I think it's like $10-15. And I recommend you getting that because why not have Philo to read for yourself, right? And maybe that's my recommendation. If you're interested in the Kabbalah, why don't you start with the first century source of those ideas? And as opposed to me telling you, read it for yourself, experience it, these ideas. Is that good? So, man, I'm sure many of you are looking up Philo right now, and he's worth it. And then, of course, look up the Book of Creations. Read it for yourself. Look into the Merkabah tradition. Look into these writings exist. I actually have a list of them. I just didn't have time to list them all off. But we have these traditions, and they're not hard to find. I find it's pretty strange that they're hidden in plain sight. There's a magic Kabbalic word that will reveal these mysteries to you. It's called Google. So you want to look up, here we go, right? So look up the Helkalat. I should just write these down right here, right? Should I do that? Okay, so these are some things you may want to write down or find out here. So look up the, there's the Helkalat. That one, of course, those are the lesser palaces of mystical ascent. So look up that one. Look up the Lot. Ramati, did I? Oh, Ramati. Ramati. Look up that work. That's the greater palaces. That gives you details of the ascent, right? Look up the work known as the Masa. Merkabah, right? That word, the chariots, of course, and of course, also even this one. Merk. I have trouble with my keyboard, so I apologize ahead of time. And even there you go, keyboard's one. That far. Book of Palaces. So look up those works. Is that helpful? Some works for you to look into. Right? That's important. And of course, obviously, the big one I want for sure for you to read is the Zephyr Yatzira, which is, of course, the book of creations that has the 32 wondrous ways of between the various powers, between the Sephiroth. Is that good? So is that enough sources to get you guys started? Is that helpful? So I gave you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sources that will help out in this field, right? And my whole thing is read the primary sources. This lecture has proven that secondary sources don't really work for us, because basically a lot of what I just said today, many of you have heard about, but never in this context. And it's like, well, why? Again, because everybody's quoting each other. Scholars get lazy at times. We like quoting each other. We start talking amongst ourselves. I was a weird one. I was the one who read primary sources ever since high school. I started reading primary sources, the Greek and Latin. That's how I started out. My dad, who's a history professor, said, don't go for why don't you read what they wrote from that time, their perspective? I said, okay. So when I entered in the history program at Cal State Fullerton, it started out, I had a different view of history because everybody's reading secondary sources, and I'm thinking, but that's not what they thought. You think about them, but I think the first step of wisdom is to understand what they thought. That's the first step. The second step in wisdom is now to be able to understand what we think about them, and then try to translate the two together. That's the third step. Because it's a different culture. It's a different time, different culture, and that's a key to wisdom. And so my thing is, don't start with secondary sources and go primary. Start with primary sources and then consult secondary sources when needed, right? When needed. And of course, you may get it wrong because when it comes to translation, you still have your perceptions, but at least you'll be more right more of the time. You'll have insights and illustrations that other people don't have. So when it comes to the Kabbalah tradition, I'd say read all the works connected to the Kabbalah and then go from there. That good? Yeah. I think it's more interesting too, you know? Yeah. Any other questions, or did I answer some of them, most of them?
Okay, I had one.
Okay.
Now, apparently you're not supposed to seek knowledge above your level, right? That's the advice from the wise, learned men.
Yeah.
So how are you ever supposed to acquire this knowledge?
How are you supposed to acquire this knowledge? Well, see, the thing is that God is all knowing, and through his will, those who are supposed to know will know. And so there will be a way that's orchestrated to do that. And that is going into, once again, Philo of Alexandria. So nothing is permitted without God's will. So if he wills it, then you'll have that knowledge. So there's kind of a choice aspect. But this goes into another thought system. If you want to be chosen, you make yourself into a purified vessel that is ready to receive it. So you take the cup of your soul and you clean it all up so that or so it can be filled. Or you take the mirror of your soul and you clean it all up, you polish it
Here.
so the light of God can of course be seen clearly upon the mirror of the soul and transform it. Of course, when you do that, the effort of cleaning the mirror of the soul, you have this idea of clearing the mirror through contemplation, as in the mirror, right? What will happen is that's through ascesis, through your action, and then as a result of that purity, then of course you're able to reflect that light, right? And there is the sense of ascension there, right? Sometimes in Christian circles, that in a sense they call that theosis, and then when you go to the moment of actually touching it, it's theoria, right? So you have that moment. So, but anyway, sorry, too much language. But anyway, so this is how. So you clear to let. So the same idea. This mirror idea is talked about a lot by Philo, and this is a huge idea within the Kabbalah. It's polished this mirror conception, and he helps articulate it. So if you want to be ready, you be a righteous person, because there are also rabbis that talk about the fact that, hey, Abraham was a righteous man, and because he was righteous, right? They will say the mirror of his soul, right, was still calmed, through his effort to receive. So only God gives, but you have the effort shown of being willing to receive. See, you're not making God do anything. You're there going, hey, I want it. God goes, you got it. Okay. So that's kind of how that idea works. Does that help answer your question?
Yes.
Maybe too much?
No. It was great.
Yeah. So, it looked like I was in the baseball field, I got it. Hitting towards you, hitting home. But yeah, so again, these ideas do come from Philo, who really does so much in merging Judaism with Middle Platonism. And it must be remembered, Middle Platonism is also the fertile ground of Christianity. So it is the fertile ground of the two. And remember, people don't know this, but the idea of God who is one but still has a multiplicity, he's still united, he's still one in every way, right? That works really well with Greco-Roman thought and works very well with Platonism. The idea is the emanations and these powers. And a form of that gets into Christianity, and that's Father, Son, Holy Spirit. So we're looking at Philo being in a very interesting position where he has this triune conception. Remember, he does have a Trinity, right? He does have a Trinity. He does have a Logos, which is also in the Christian Trinity, right? Logos, the Word, one. But he also has the power of creation and the power of restraint, which of course you see in the Kabbalah. And there's a threesome there. And then of course you have the realm of the spirit realm, and of course the veil, and of course the realm of the material world. But you have that same thing in Christianity. So what will happen is the same ideas that contribute to the Trinity are the same ideas that contribute to Kabbalah. But it's understood in a different way. Is that making sense? But see, but if you're Jewish, you go, but yeah, God is always one. The Christians will say, yeah, God is always one. So what's missing in this? What's missing is understanding Middle Platonism, and then of course Neoplatonism. Does that make sense? That's the missing piece. And you got to realize that the Council of Nicaea defined the Trinity using nothing but Neoplatonic terms. You know, that came about. But some of that same language was also applied to earlier on within Judaism, found in Philo. Is this fascinating? Right? So, you know, this is a big deal, and nobody will ever want to talk about this. This is one of those topics where it's like, oh no, doing the tap dance. But you can see now, I've given you enough context where you can see it. And I've just given you a book, Philo of Alexandria. Read Philo. Philo. Read him. And you don't even have to listen to me. You can just read it there. It's like, so don't blame me. You know, when you read about these emanations and these various powers, and he's a good Jew, he's considered, he's good. He is still quoted today as a big deal in Judaism. He's a big deal. He's not a nobody, right? He's Alexandrian Judaism. So when you read about these things, then you go, oh, wow, this is interesting about looking at God and seeing his powers as they emanate forth, and there is this triune conception at the very top. And it's like, yeah, you know, so it would make sense, right? And of course, also the idea of, get this, according to the Philo, but according to the Zohar too, God, in a sense, is limiting himself to be seen as a mirror in the material world. So, but you have that conception also within Christianity. But they do that, but they interpret that in connection to the Logos, which is Jesus. Limited flesh. So this is a joy when it comes to Christology. Oh, yeah. I have fun at these kinds of events. I'm some troubles because what I do is I bring the text with me. I say, where do you have this? I'm like, here.
Here.
There, you know, I got 3,000 books. I do. I have 3,000 books. So yeah, it's all there. Yes, and I took the time to count them one time. And I gave up around 2,700. I'm going, there's more bookshelves. And like I said, I'm stopping. So yeah, there's a lot of information here. So I know what books to bring, and I pile them up and then just have a conversation. So I tend to rattle on, you know, too much. I have the longest master's thesis at Cal State Fullerton. It's 997 pages.
Oh my goodness.
I am struck by the similarity of Zohar and Zoroastrianism.
You know, and of course you're going to have that idea coming to a nice mixture when, and this is, thank you, Terry, for bringing this up. You got to remember that this mysticism, the Merkavah tradition, goes into the Middle East. It is in Babylon. It is in what is now Iraq. It is in Persia. This is that missing link. And of course, Zoroastrianism was the main religion in that area until the advent of Islam. So absolutely, you're going to get those ideas. But I want to tell you a little secret. Zoroastrianism kind of mixes with Platonism too. You just can't keep anything separate anymore. Yeah, the good old days of duality. But they start changing things too. People just philosophers just can't. Philosophers. Your husband's one. They just they can't stay quiet. So they're on the road. And they're going to be talking about everything, and so these ideas just travel with them. How can they not? I think philosophers are philosophers because they like to hear themselves. And that's okay. But that means everybody else hears them, and that means that they trade their wares and they go everywhere. So I can trace Shramanas who are Indian mystics. I can trace their lives from India all the way to Europe. We have Indian Shramanas who are buried in Turkey. There's a section of Alexandria where all those of the Indic philosophy used to live in Alexandria. They're everywhere. In fact, you have also the roots of Neoplatonism. Ammonius Saccas from Alexandria was the one who taught, of course, Plotinus. Ammonius Saccas, Saccas, is a form of the word Sakyas. Sakyas as in hello, Buddha. Right? And what happened is that Ammonius Saccas, what was he? Oh, that's right. His background, part of his background was from India, and he lived in Alexandria, and he helped create Neoplatonism through Plotinus. So you want a direct connection? Google. There it is. Ammonius Saccas. Is that cool? Right? And you can see those ideas pretty easily if you read Plotinus's works. Yeah, it's there. It's right there. It's obvious. And so it is a small world after all, without all the crazy animatronics singing terrible songs over and over again. So, it is. It just, it's amazing. So Ammonius Saccas. Also, I want to say that even the Platonic tradition, going through the Christian Platonic tradition, the Middle Platonists, you got Clement of Alexandria, who talks about these ideas. His teacher, Pataneus, where did he go? He went to India, and he writes about it. And it's like, oh, you went to India? Yeah, and he brought back ideas. So no wonder all these ideas are all mixed together. They're all mixed up. Is that making sense? Yeah. So it's incredible. So when people say, oh, India, it's so far away. No, it's not. In the Western world, what's it going to do? If you take the Pony Express, from Asia Minor, from Ephesus, which is still active, you get to Susa by Pony Express. It'll take 2 weeks. It'll take another week from there to Indus River. Okay, that's how. Yes, it'll take forever if you do the ox wheel, wheel traffic. It'll take months, but not by Pony Express. But remember, these people are traveling, and who set that up? It was the Persians, the Great Golden Road. And they had 111 postal stations, right? So I mean, so travel went constant. Remember, Alexander the Great, he got to the Indus River, and even though he left, the Greeks stayed there for what? For 200 more years, And so people don't realize that there's that connection too. Who helped write the history of India? Megacines. Where was he? He was at Pataliputra, the capital of the Mauryan Empire, for heaven's sakes. And he's writing about India as a Greek in India. So it is not the small world that we saw. So these ideas that we see with the Kabbalah are really fluid, extremely fluid. And when people, I don't know what scholars do. They like to make everything into compartments. They want to put everything in little boxes. And the reality is I want to fracture those boxes, but I don't want to do it the shell way. I'm not going to play the shell game. But I think we need to have more conversations, and we need to end the territorial games. Okay, I'm picking off my soapbox. So thank you, Kristen, for being here. I hope you enjoyed the talk. Oh, whew. And
Very much. Very much.
yeah, so thank you for, it's wonderful having seen you again. So,
How do you spell Protocus?
huh?
How do you spell, oh, ammoniacoccus? Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. I want to look him up.
I'm going to spell it phonetically
Okay.
because I know it in Greek. So I'm going to look up the English way of saying it because otherwise I'll give you the wrong spelling.
And then I think I might have misspelled Patanus, but I want to look that up too.
Comes right up. Okay. It's
Uh-huh.
Ammonius and then Saccas. Saccas.
Okay. I almost had it right. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I think
Yeah, so you-
Patanus is Patanaus.
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look that stuff up.
Huh?
So
It's
they
interesting.
argue which is older, Zoroastrianism or Judaism, and you would say neither, both. What?
Well, I mean, that's a trick question. I mean, here's the problem. Okay, so the question is, when do we have the Judaism that we have now? And so that's the debate. You know, some people will say it's the Babylonian captivity. You know, the 500s BCE, where you get the idea of, you know, monotheism as being centralized for everybody. The idea of God's chosen people. You know, Israel being important. They're not there. You know, have of course the idea of, you know, Torah and scripture and tradition as being important for everybody. You have circumcision as being important for everybody. You know, celebration of festivals, and of course, one circumcision, dietary rules. Anyway, I got those. So remember, Judaism followed all this beforehand, but only among certain people. You know, the priests, you know, priestly castes and a few groups did this, but not everybody. And I had somebody say, well, where's the evidence? I said, well, actually, it's even in the Bible. Not everybody. You know, where could I find this source? Well, I don't know, First Kings, Second Kings, First Chronicles, Second Chronicles, you know, it's everywhere, you know. And it's like, well, give me more evidence. I don't want to believe the Bible. Okay, it's called archaeology, which I was trained by Tammy Snyder, who is, of course, Telefar out of Israel. So yeah, you know, I could tell you that. And there's so much evidence in the material culture that before we get to the Babylonian captivity, a lot of those people who are understood as Jews are practicing whatever the heck they want. They're worshiping different gods and everything else. The material culture changes after the 6th century. Not completely. There's still lots of science. That's a little better, maybe a little bit better. You know, after it's even better when it comes to after the Persian Empire. Okay, now we're going somewhere. So what about Zoroastrianism? Zoroastrianism, they'll say way back to 14 or 12. I would say 700 to 600 BCE, you got Zoroaster. But here's the problem. During the Babylonian captivity, you got Zoroastrianism and their ideas mixing with Judaism. So you look at the older part of the Hebrew Bible, you go, do you got an apocalypse? No, but you do look at Daniel. And that's very much Zoroastrianism, that idea, right? So you have these concepts. What about the devil, right? You know, you have a shadowy kind of figure, but you get it's more defined because agromanu, you know, which is, you know, Ahura Mazda is the evil spirit, you know, the balance. You have that there. So that enters into Judaism. You have Saurasant. Saurasant is the chosen one, according to Zoroastrianism, right? Saurasant. He is the one chosen to do what? He's born of a virgin, right? He's going to do miracles. He's going to do wonderful things. He's going to raise the dead. Then there's going to be a great apocalypse, and he's going to the living and the dead. There's going to be a great battle. This is Zoroastrianism. And what happens is that you know, there's this big battle, and Saurasant is a part of that. Well, this chosen one to save us from the apocalypse, where does it go? It goes right into Judaism. And you know where it goes deeply into Judaism? It goes into the groups that are connected to the Dead Sea Scrolls. Oh, wow, that's really the. Of course, I've done lectures on the Dead Sea Scrolls, and obviously you've seen Bring the Dead Sea Scrolls and so forth. And but anyway, the point of the matter is that yeah. So there it is. It's interesting that the communities that connected the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran and other places, Essenes and other groups. Therapeutai, you have other groups that are about, okay, Therapeutai are mentioned in Philo of Alexandria. That's where we get the information from. Anyway, so what happens is all these groups are rebelling against the current Judaism that's too much Greek and Roman. So they're going to really overemphasize their Zoroastrian affiliations. Although recently, the piece of the more from that context arrived recently, a couple of weeks ago, that was in Greek. That's a whole other point. So we do have some in Greek, but a lot of it is in the Aramaic. A lot of it is in Hebrew. And so Zoroastrianism runs really strong within that element of Judaism, but not necessarily all the elements. Is that helpful? And of course, the idea of Sarasat will become the chosen one, will become the anointed one, which will become, of course, obviously the Messiah. So, of course, as you know, if you're a practitioner of Zoroastrianism, their high priests are called magi. They are today. So if you go, as you know, as Lauren knows, go to the fire temple.
Oh,
Yeah, the magi. Well, wait a minute, who visited Jesus? The magi. Oh, that makes sense now. The Sarasot has arrived. Born of a virgin. Why not? Just add to this. And by the way, everybody and their mother knew what magi were in ancient times. Let's say everybody and their mother, but a lot of people knew who the magi were because that was common belief. Zoroastrians, they were everywhere throughout the Roman Empire. They're everywhere. They're your neighbors. This is not like some secluded belief. This is like popular knowledge. When that idea was written down, whether there was actual wise men visited Jesus or not, or even the story at all, whether or not, the person who wrote that down and wrote down magi knew very well that his readers knew, oh, those are priests of Zoroastrianism. They knew that. They knew that because if you read writings from that time, everybody knows who the magi are. That's where we get the word magic, magia, right? Because it's that foreign, exotic ritual stuff that those other people do. We don't do that. We do rituals of power. Those exotic ones, they do magic, which is like the magi, which is what the priests do. Hope that helps. So that's exotic magic. So how we understand magic today is not magic in those days. Lots of fun stuff. You guys having fun yet?
Yes.
No. Anyway, so much information, so much to talk about. But seeing connections everywhere, huh? Yeah, connections everywhere. Anyway, so
Totally
do you
love
have any
it.
other questions? Huh?
Totally love it. I've always enjoyed your lectures, and I was hearing some new things, although it was blending with some of the things I studied with Gershom Scholem, Kook, and Aryeh Kaplan. So between
Wonderful.
Yeah. So I'm like,
I'm honored.
Sure, I had the Sefer Yetzirah, and I'm like so upset. So I just ordered that in the Bahir because I had to have the right.
Yes,
right.
that's the way you do it.
Philo,
Yep.
Got to do it.
You got to do it directly. I think that those who want to follow the Kabbalah, the path of the Kabbalah, should start by just reading the primary works.
Yeah. Sholem's, Godhead was phenomenal. It was mind blowing, absolutely mind blowing. So, yay.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. Wow. So now you see how everything's all connected, right?
How am I supposed to sleep tonight, right?
Yeah, I know.
No, your brain just goes round and round trying to process all the information.
I was writing like a crazed woman. So yeah, and I'm grateful. It's so good, so good. So thank you so much as always.
Yeah. So you have I think by the end of the day, I'd probably give you about 10 texts to read. But you'll be surprised how better you will feel all of this tradition, because what will happen is scholars will just will refer these ideas and they will manipulate the usage of these ideas just to fit whatever they're wanting to do at that time. You can sit there with a smile on your face, knowing that, well, you've read the materials, you know how these ideas connect. And I think that, yeah. And I think that it will speak to you more, the tradition.
Totally excited. Thank you so much, as always.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. You'll reflect upon it. You'll be that chosen vessel that's been cleaned and ready to reflect the glory of God.
Find that divine spark. Break
The
those.
divine spark. Yeah. Stay away from the seashells. Stay away from the shells. You'll be okay. All good.
Have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, Kathleen. Wonderful. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Oh, you good? Hi, Laurel.
Hi.
Hi. All right. Hi, Michelle. So we got Sarah. We got Jessica here too. Hi, Jessica.
I know. All
Hi.
Hi. So did you guys enjoy yourselves? Was it good?
Yeah, it was really good. Thank you.
There's also the Hermetic Kabbalah. There's so many different Kabbalahs. So
There's a Christian Kabbalah.
there's a Christian Kabbalah.
I didn't
Well,
know.
yeah, but do you see how that could be?
Mhm.
Does that make sense? That now it's like on a stretch, even though it's a created tradition, obviously. Still, you can see where, okay, yeah, I can see this. You can see how it can adapt to a Christian context. It can adapt to a pagan context if you have the idea of a monad, of a oneness. Have that. So if you are a pagan that will follow after a Platonic tradition, then that will work. But it doesn't work very well unless you have an animistic conception. It doesn't work very well if you're absolute polytheistic. But if you see the various gods as many faces of the one God, you can do that. Or not one God, I shouldn't say that. Many faces in the eminent nature sense, because you got to realize the Kabbalah still has this idea of being eminent nature, which can also translate over eventually into animism.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, is there a Hindu
Makes
Kabbalah?
sense.
Is there a Hindu Kabbalah? And the answer is there are Hindu-like aspects that follow like the Kabbalah. There are those kinds of connections and ideas, and there's you have that. You have, of course, you have that through the yogas, right? I mean, think about the yogas. You got the Raja Yoga, right? You got the Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga. You got the Bhakti Yoga. What do? Right? You still the mirror of your soul. You use the same analogy through various efforts, right? And in many cases, they'll mention the light of the radiance of the gods or the God above, of Krishna, right? Vishnu. And that radiance, I have these books over there. It talks about it, and that's transformative, right? Purifies you. You're moving out of the material realm. You're becoming what? Oh, yeah, you're becoming more spiritual. You're moving up through various ways in life. So, not exactly, but there is a pathway for achieving this. And you have, at a certain point, do you have epiphanies? Do you have mystical experiences? Yeah. So, not exact, but you do have something to it. And then, of course, you do have, think about this. Okay, sorry, Sarah, you have technical difficulties. I mean, you have
It was
this.
good seeing you, Sarah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
good night, Sarah.
Good night, Sarah. Yeah, I mean, you have the idea, for example, Brahma, he contemplates what comes out of his head, the goddess of wisdom, who is Sarasvati. And what's another name for Sarasvati? She's also known as Vash. What does Vash mean? It means that which is spoken. It means the word. So the word comes forth out of the mind of Brahma. And what does it do? Sarasvati creates creation.
Okay.
She's a creative force. She is the word that creates the universe. She organizes it. She separates the dry land from the wet land, and she organizes everything. Doesn't it sound familiar? It also reminds me of Zeus with, of course, with Athena coming out of his head, right? Who's goddess of wisdom.
Hmm.
Look at all these parallels, right? And then what happens from there? Goes energy. She organizes it, and then it goes over to who? The Vishnu. What does Vishnu do? He is the one. He's masculine. He is the preserver. He preserves things, right? He maintains it. He keeps it going. He's also the ultimate IT guy. When there's problems, troubleshooting problems, what does he do? He turns himself into an avatar, right? And he goes and fixes things like Rama and Krishna. And who's his consort? Lakshmi. What does she do? Moving over to her. See, masculine, feminine. Are you guys getting this? What did she do? Lakshmi makes things bountiful, makes things plentiful. She turns into a multiplicity. So Brahman, who creates the stuff, Sarasvati emerges. She, through her wisdom, the word wisdom, right? Kalpa, right? Wisdom creates, organizes the stuff, right? And then it goes over to Vishnu, who preserves the stuff, and then Lakshmi makes a multiplicity. Where does it go from there? It goes to Shiva. What does he do? He destroys it. But then he has the Shakti power, the feminine side that is acting in transformation. Of course, you got Kali, you got Durga, you got Parvati, all these other goddesses. And where does that go? Well, that in sense goes back into the other, the creative force that goes back into what? Brahma. And the whole thing repeats over and over again. So anyway. So, there does seem to be some kind of structure there. What do you think? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Masculine, feminine, energies moving. I don't know. So, of course, this follows the agricultural cycles, right? You got, Brahma, it would be like the seed, Sarasvati would be, plowing the fields, organizing it. Vishnu would be watering, maintaining. Obviously, Lakshmi would be the harvest. And of course, when this idea came about, the concept of burning fields for fertility came about. So Shiva is the creative force that burns the fields, and in order to make the nutrients, festive. Maybe make it alive again. And of course, that energy is the feminine, right? Because it's transformative, it's creation, and it goes back to the seed again. I don't know. So just thoughts. So of course, every Hindu has a different perspective on this. But then again, for a long time, every Jew had a different perspective on these mystical traditions, and because it was the hidden Torah. So it's fluid, and so it becomes entrenched. Not with the Zohar, but it does become a little bit more agreed upon.
Mhm.
And then now today we go, if it's not in the form of the Zohar, it's not Kabbalah, and that smacks of orthodoxy.
Mhm. Oh,
And
and
that
it's one thing I've learned through listening to all of your lectures is that everything influences everything else. And
does.
when I was growing up reading the Greek myths, there was Athena, and Athena was this one thing. And Athena isn't one thing; she's 100 different things that we slap the same name onto. But that happens everywhere, all the time, forever.
Forever. And I think that for me is fascinating. I think that people, the ideas travel through the trade routes, through oral tradition, and even psychologically, we have similarities to come up with the same idea in different places. But ultimately, it is a small world after all, and we do interact with each other, and we can't help it. And I think that the exclusivism of the idea of saying that these traditions don't talk to each other, it's ridiculous, especially when they use the same names. The same way of operating these ideas. So, and of course, obviously Zoroastrianism, then we can go on to Manichaeism too. We can go here, or the Mandean belief system, and how these ideas connect to not only like Judaism, but Christianity, or better still, Islam. People don't realize there's connections with Islam in these traditions. So, unfortunately, the areas where that happened are problematic today, not just because of politics, but because of just it's just difficult for scholars to get access to a lot of materials. So. All right. Well, I think This has been fun, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thank you. If you don't have any more questions, so Laurel or Jessica or Michelle? Oh,
Nope.
Not
some
that
notes.
I can think of. No.
all right.
Thank
Okay,
you.
well, you've got that early meeting tomorrow. Maybe we should sign off.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have a meeting at 9 o'clock. So,
Yeah.
so I will say good night. I'll get some shut eye, and then I get to go to department meeting as we talk about the future of a class called historical thinking, how that should change or not change, and see what happens.
Well, good luck.
Good
Thank
luck.
you. Good night,
Thank you.
everybody.
Have a good night.
Bye.
So long.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.